Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hi everybody and welcome back to the English with Kirsty podcast, and today I have another special guest. Welcome, Craig. It's good to see you after 7 years. We've been talking, we started talking about 7 years ago because we were planning a collaboration, and now we finally made it into the same.
We finally made this. Must be one of the longest planned collaborations in history, 7 years, but we got there in the end.
Yeah,
Kirsty,
we did.
And that's what counts.
And that's down to you because you messaged me a couple of weeks ago. So thank you for that. And thank you for following up. So tell us something about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What's your connection to languages?
Well, I'm from London originally, born and raised in London, as you can probably guess from my accent. I traveled quite a bit in my formative years when I was younger, looking for the meaning of life.
Okay.
I didn't find it, so
Still looking.
still looking. And then at some point while I was traveling, I got interested in teaching English. And then I suddenly realized I had no idea how to teach my own language. So I went back to the UK and took a CELTA course, which is the first step on the ladder of teaching English as a second language, and started teaching and thoroughly enjoyed it and realized that I didn't know my own grammar and I had to learn my own language, the grammar of my own language. I did another qualification, a higher qualification, and then I moved to Spain back in 1997, and that's where I am now. So I worked for the British Council here in Valencia for many years and got made redundant during COVID, which led me to becoming self-employed, teaching online. And that's what I'm doing now, teaching English online to groups of students.
Okay, so why Spain? If you've traveled around, I mean, Spain's a nice country, but why Spain specifically?
My parents retired here. They've since passed away. They're not with us anymore, but my sister came as well with her husband, and they moved to a lovely little place down the coast. But the only place I could get work as a teacher was Valencia. So I thought after many years of being rather selfish and traveling, I thought, oh, why not go and be close to my family for a while. So that was the reason, simply because they had already moved here permanently and bought a house.
Okay, so you're settled there, and that's one of the nice things about, if you're working online, you can really be anywhere with a good internet connection. What kind of people do you work with? Like, do you have a preference? What it's a really good student for you? I don't mean academically good, but what's somebody that you really enjoy working with?
I enjoy working with one-to-one students when there's a specific goal. So I'm not too keen on general English that is based around a course book and goes on and on for weeks and weeks and weeks. I don't find that particularly satisfying, but I do love short-term goals like preparing a presentation for work or passing a speaking exam, a Cambridge exam or similar, or perhaps a job interview preparation. So you can really focus in on what they're trying to achieve and then tailor make and design a few lessons based around that. I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And also groups. I love working with groups from different countries. I like those lessons where you can bring cultural diversity into it. And it's like, what is it like in India? What is it like for you in Ukraine? What is it like for you in South America, wherever they're from? Bringing that point of view into group conversation, I find that very, very rewarding as well.
Yeah, I think you learn something too, then, don't you? You have the opportunity to learn about other people and cultures and different ways of doing things. And that makes it interesting.
I think, yeah, and I think because I spent so many years teaching only Spanish students here in Valencia,
Okay.
which was nice, with lovely, lovely people, but it was quite a limited view of the world as well, culturally. So I like the eclectic approach of people from different countries.
Yeah, I'm starting to do more of that as well now. And I was working with German speaking clients, but to be fair, they weren't all German clients, because there's a lot of migration to Germany too. So I worked with people from different countries, but now that's kind of increasing. So yeah, it's good to travel all around the world, all around Europe without leaving your desk. I think that's another fun aspect of it.
Exactly. It wouldn't have been thinkable 25 years ago. So it's amazing. It really is really has opened doors for me.
Yeah, and I think it's great that you can also while you're doing that, learn something about your own language. I was thinking when you said that it's true because I don't know if it's the way that English is taught in England, but I certainly learned a lot more about English when I started learning other languages at school. And then when I became a teacher too, it's you understand, why is it like that? You just accept that some things are the way they are, and actually, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. There must be a rule for that. Why is it this way? What is your experience with other languages? Which did you have other languages at school? Did you? How is it living in Spain? Did you do a Spanish course or?
Oh, where to start with that one? Well, I learned French for five years at school. Can't speak French, of course, because back in the day we learned from cassettes and it was repetition and it was very grammar focused and hardly any speaking and interaction. So I like the language. I like French. I can get the gist of a conversation, but I'm hopeless at speaking it. Um, Spanish was, yeah, I learned Spanish briefly before I came over here. I did a short course, and my wife is Spanish, so my language learning really took off as soon as I met her.
You had
Um,
a reason.
we had a reason to communicate, so that was nice. But I also had to do some formal language courses here in Valencia. So I think it was probably a combination of both the formal language structure and obviously living in the country and using it every day. That's probably the perfect way to fluency. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it has to be the combination, and it also has to be you have to have a reason. I don't know how much it's part of your life now, but at home, whether your wife speaks English too. But I think if you have this motivation, then it really helps you to, especially at the early stages, it really helps you to move past the beginner stages.
Although
And
I want to add though, Kirsty, I need to work on my grammar. My grammar is not good. And I notice it a lot when I'm in Spanish company and we're speaking Spanish with friends, and I need to tell an anecdote about something that happened in the past or extended speaking, then I struggle a bit with sentence structure and grammar, tenses. So I need to work on that. So my comprehension's fine. My vocabulary is pretty good, but I do need to go back to the books and learn a bit more grammar, I think.
yeah, but I think it's good if you know that, then you can do something about it as well. It's like sometimes we don't know what we don't know, but if we realize where our challenges are, then we can do something to address them. But I think also as a teacher, that makes you relatable because you're not like, oh, Mr. Perfect teacher, like knows. Like if we're learning other languages, we too have things that we need to work on or areas that we're not so comfortable with. And I think as teachers, that makes us more relatable as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I just like my students to relax and just feel comfortable. And if they're making mistakes, that's fine. And I
Mm,
hear mistakes from native speakers of English all the time. And I'm
absolutely.
sure I make them myself. So it's more of a journey than anything else. And you can't wake up one morning and say, "Oh, now I know Spanish," or "Now I know English." It just doesn't work that way. I learn new English words every week, so you never really finish.
And language is changing too. Look at all the new vocabulary we got when the pandemic hit, like
Yep,
all these COVID related words that we didn't have before. Suddenly everybody was using them and everybody knew what they meant. But 6 months ago, nobody knew that. So,
exactly, exactly. I learned a new expression last week. If you agree with someone in street slang, you can just say word, and that
really?
means yeah. Like
Okay.
if you say it's really difficult to learn Romanian, and I say word, that means yes, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I didn't know that.
I'm not cool enough to know that.
I'm not cool enough to say it, but so just let's keep it between us. Let's not put it out there into podcast land. Hope no one's listening.
No, they won't. They won't. Or if you are, don't tell anyone. So yeah.
Don't tell anyone. Keep it between us.
What was it like for you moving to Spain then? Were there any things that were really different in terms of the way people communicated or the way things got done that you found that you had to get used to? Like cultural
Body
differences?
language was tricky.
Okay.
In the UK, you tend to keep a bit of a distance, and it's not so touchy and close as it is in Spain and other Mediterranean countries. So my
Mm.
first week, I was teaching a class at the British Council, and in the break, not the first week, the first month, a guy came up to me, a young guy, and he put his arm around me, and he said, like, I'm really, really sorry, Craig, I haven't done the homework this week. And I felt uncomfortable. But of course, here that's the sign of affection for your teacher. I would never dream of putting my arm around my teacher in the UK
Mm.
to apologize for something. So, but you learn these cultural differences and you learn to accept them. So that was one thing that surprised me in my first month here.
Yeah, and it's also understanding what that means because in the UK, if someone did that, that would mean something different. That would mean they wanted to be in your space more than, like I think it's understanding what's happening and then understanding what you want to do about that, whether you're going to adopt this body language too, or even if you don't, it's like, okay, I know what this person is trying to communicate, trying to say by the way that they're behaving.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
you don't get that in books usually. Like I think that's one of the interesting things about international communication. Like I was speaking to some German people who moved here and they were living here now, working here, and about some of the things with English that caused them trouble at the beginning. And they were saying that it's the English people, it's not about being polite. It's about not being very direct or not really telling the truth in some cases, like saying it's okay when it's not okay, or I don't mind when you really do mind, or that's interesting when you mean that's stupid idea. Why would you do that? Interesting doesn't necessarily mean interesting. It's all these hidden things that people are expected to know sometimes in communication, which don't always mean what you think they mean. Like if you typed it into a translation site, you would get the literal meaning, but then you would also get what people actually want to tell you with that.
Yeah,
And I guess,
I was watching something on TV yesterday, my sister in English, and in the TV series, someone gave somebody else a really horrible present, and they opened the present and they said, "Oh, wow, I've never seen anything like that in my life." But I mean, that's very neutral, but
but it's
they're
not good.
they're avoiding saying how horrible it is, and somebody else said, "Well, I'm speechless. Wow." Because it's
Because I
so
haven't got
bad.
anything good to say. Yeah.
Exactly, all those hidden meanings that hide
Yeah.
behind words and expressions sometimes. Yeah, that's pragmatics.
And that's a challenge. That
Yeah.
that takes time, and that means that really it's good to have conversations with real people. Like I say to my students, I guess you say too, like if you talk with real people, you'll find out some of these things. If you only ever read books or articles meant for language learners, maybe they won't be there. But as soon as you start having conversations with real people that use the language, then that's when you discover these challenges.
Yeah, and there's really no excuse these days. I mean, in the past, you could say, well, I don't live in the UK, I don't live in an English speaking country. But now we've got the internet and we can connect like we're connecting now over the internet, over Zoom. Then you can have those conversations and practice language with people.
Mm. And it's more of a real experience too. You can come across some of those accents which maybe take a little bit longer to figure out, or you can learn some expressions. I learned one today thanks to you, but you can learn things that you maybe won't find in the books, but that people really say.
Word.
So you were saying that you wanted to very good.
Word.
You spoke a lot of Spanish, or you were speaking with Spanish speaking students. Do you use Spanish in your classes at all, or do you prefer to only speak English?
I prefer to speak English if there's a group of only Spanish speakers on the Zoom call, for example, or the same when I used to teach in the classroom, if everybody there was a Spanish speaker, then maybe I'd use it as a shortcut. So instead of going on this long-winded, lengthy description to describe a word that they might or might not understand, I'll just translate it to Spanish and then
Mm.
move on, but then move on in English. And if the students ever switch or ask me a question in Spanish, then I would answer in English and say, please keep it in English. That's what we're learning here. But occasionally I use it just to save time if it's possible. What about you?
I think it depends who I'm with because I do a lot of one-to-one, and if somebody doesn't know how to ask a question in English, I would rather they ask the question than go away wondering about something.
Hmm.
So I'm open to using German, maybe Romanian in my beginner, low intermediate classes. The others don't need it, but if somebody is like, oh, what's this word? Then that's okay. Or I really want people to be able to ask. So if they don't understand something or they don't understand what we're doing, or to the point, then I'd rather explain something in German for a beginner group so everybody knows exactly what we're doing, and then we go back to English. So I think it's something you shouldn't rely on too much, but it's a tool that you can have, as you say, if everybody speaks the language that you want to use. Because if they don't, it can feel like they're being excluded, and that's not nice. I wouldn't want that.
Yeah,
But
I've had that a couple of times
mm,
actually with students where the majority of the group were Spanish speakers, but maybe there was one Hungarian speaker in the class, for example, and then of course the other students would say something in Spanish sometimes, forgetting that there was one person who
yeah,
didn't
that's
understand. So
not
then
good.
you have to say let's keep it in English because so and so can't understand. Yeah.
Yeah, because it feels like you've got different levels of you know, the hierarchy depending on who speaks which language, and that isn't good. But I think one-to-one, if somebody has a question, and then it's okay sometimes,
Mm.
especially for beginners. But yeah, I know some schools. I was asking because I don't know how it was working for the British Council. I know some of the bigger language schools kind of forbid it, and I think yeah, in a multilingual classroom, I can understand, but one-to-one, I think no,
Yeah.
it's okay. But yeah, everyone's different. And speaking about the work that you did before, one difference between us is that I don't have a lot of experience in exam preparation. It's not something I focus on at all. And I know that's something that you did do a lot of work on. So sometimes I have podcast listeners who ask about this. So what kind of tips would you give to people who are thinking about or who've signed up to do the Cambridge speaking exam? How can they prepare themselves, and what kind of tips would you give people who want to do that?
Well, I think it depends if the student is studying with a teacher, either in an academy or a one-to-one teacher, or if they're preparing the exam by themselves. But either way, I think you need a study plan. We can talk about the speaking in particular if you like, but just
Yeah.
generally about the exam. What I would suggest is take a mock test, for example, with the reading and use of English, and then work on your weaknesses, not your strengths. So sit down
Mm,
with a full exam and do it in an hour and 15 minutes. Don't have any interruptions. Don't use your dictionaries. Don't use the internet. See what you can do now. Check your answers and think, oh, I need to work on part two. That was really bad. Or, oh, I'm okay with part three. I won't need to worry about that. So the idea is to bring up your weak areas so that overall you're going to get a higher mark when you take the exam. And I think that's true to a certain extent with the speaking. But obviously, with the speaking, you'd need a teacher because AI is not at that stage yet where it can
mm,
give you like a really good summary of your weak areas in speaking. So, I mean, you could get online with a teacher and you can do a test, a formal test, and then get feedback on the areas you need to improve. But generally speaking, just immerse yourself in English as much as possible, and that means reading widely and varying your reading and your listening. Vary your sources. Don't just only watch a TV series like Friends. That you have to vary. You have to listen
mm,
to the news. You have to listen to different accents. Music is good as well. Occasionally, that's good for pronunciation and rhythm. Read blogs about things you're interested in, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, use apps on your phone. So it's this eclectic approach of trying to suck in and get English, immerse yourself from as many angles as possible and as many varieties as possible. And then at the same time, get to know the exam. So you need to form some strategies for the listening paper. You need to know what kind of reading you need to do for each section. Are you skimming or scanning the text? You need to read for general understanding or specific information. And then the use of English has particular strategies to it as well. There are many, many resources on YouTube and on the web for this. So make sure you know the exam, especially the
Mm.
speaking exam, before the day when you take it. You don't just want to walk into the room and be surprised by the examiner interrupting you when the time is up for your minute of solo speaking. So you really need to know the different parts of the speaking test, so that there are no surprises on the day. And work on your timing as well when you're writing. You get 45 minutes to do two pieces of, well, one piece of writing, but you need to do two. So that's an hour and a half for two pieces of writing. So you decide when you move from one to the other.
Oh, okay.
And it's the
Yeah.
same with the reading and use of English. You decide when you move from one part to another part. So you need to make sure you can do all of the seven parts in the allotted time.
I guess
And
that's even the same with speaking though, because if you know that you have a minute and you spend too long on the first part and then you don't get to make your most important point. I think I've only worked with a couple of students on this, and I thought that some people, they don't know what to say, and that's hard, but some people have a lot of ideas and they almost have too much to say because they're nervous, and it's about making sure that you don't run out of time. Otherwise, you won't get the points for the good things that you would have said if you'd had the time for them. There's a lot to
exactly.
think
Yeah.
about.
The most important thing in the speaking, to answer the question, and you're sometimes asked to compare photographs and say how they're similar and how they're different. Of course, do that for a few seconds, but very, very quickly, you need to be addressing and answering that question. That's the most important thing. And then if you've got time at the end and you've got maybe 10, 15 seconds and you don't know what to say, you can just personalize one or two of the pictures and say, oh, I really like this one because I love going to the beach, or I really hate traveling by car because of the traffic. So if you personalize it, that gives you some ammunition. It gives you some ideas to keep speaking until the examiner says thank you. And when the examiner says thank you, that means you have
You've
to
had it.
stop. So
That's
don't
enough.
be surprised if that happens in the middle of a sentence. That's perfectly normal.
And what about people who say, like they see the topic that they have to talk about and they say, I don't know anything about that. What can I say about that? Or I don't have an opinion on that, whether this is right or not. Or how do they get past this feeling of like, I have nothing to say. What am I going to do? What strategies can they use then?
Okay. Well, for let's say for the B2 first exam from Cambridge and the C1 advanced, to a certain extent, look, the topics are quite general. I mean, you're probably going to get something about the environment, something about climate change, perhaps something about travel and holidays, something about technology. So they're very general topics that you would find in any course book. And I think most students will be able to speak about those general topics. Now, when you get to the higher levels, more like C2 proficiency, then the topics become more abstract. But then when you're at that level, I mean, you should be able to hypothesize and give opinions about abstract topics. And if you can't do that, and you have, then I mean, you should be able to in your language, really. And then if you've got that higher level, you should be able to do it in English. So the only thing I can say is just practice. Make sure you look at past papers, past questions. What
Mm.
kind of things are they asking? And again, you can find that material on YouTube and just get an idea of the kind of questions they're asking. But definitely at B2 first, then they're going to be quite concrete questions around those known topics of sort of nature and work and holidays and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I guess I mean I wouldn't encourage people to lie, but the examiner doesn't know whether this is actually your opinion. They really want to know whether you can express an opinion in English. So,
Exactly.
and the
Yeah.
answer is better than no answer.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Why not? I mean, yeah. If it comes up, then just lie. Just
We didn't say that.
make something up. Yeah.
Be
You don't have to
creative.
tell the
That sounds
truth.
better than lie. Um, I think, did you say that you'd made some resources to help people who are studying for this exam?
Yeah, on YouTube, on the YouTube channel I have at Mansion Inglés, it's La Mansión del Inglés, which I could probably spell later if you want me to. But there are many, many videos about the B2 first exam. So if anyone's preparing for that, you're welcome to go and have a look. There's a playlist of Cambridge B2 first videos that take you through all the different parts of the exam step by step and break down what you should be doing for each part. So that includes the listening, the speaking, the writing, and the reading and use of English.
Yeah, I'm sure that would be very useful because sometimes you just need to take that methodical approach, like to look at what there is in the exam and then what you need to do for those different parts. And if you've broken that down for them, I think that'd be really helpful. So we'll include the link to that on the show notes page as well.
Mhm.
And the other thing we need to talk about is your podcast. So that's another way that people can find out about what you're doing and what kind of podcast do you have? What do you do on the podcast, and who's the podcast for?
It's for anybody who wants to improve their English. And if you have a good B1 level, let's say, I hope you'll find it useful. You shouldn't have any problems understanding us. I have a co-host, a good friend who is still working at the British Council. Strangely, he managed to keep his job, which probably says more about him than it does about me. But we do the podcast together, and we absolutely love it. We've been doing it since 2014. We just passed our 500th episode that we're very
Wow.
proud of, and it's a weekly show. And together, we basically we like to say that nothing has ever stopped us talking about things we know absolutely nothing about. So
Okay.
sometimes we touch on topics that really we don't know anything about, but we're using them as a medium to help you with your English. So obviously we talk about grammar, vocabulary, listening skills, all that, all those good things. But we also talk about very, very general things as well, more abstract topics and anything that the audience wants us to talk about or anything that we can think of. So it's very varied and hopefully entertaining as well. We try and make it fun.
Yeah, because I think language learning should be fun, and I think if people can enjoy themselves, enjoy the podcast that they're listening to, then they're more likely to remember things and to keep listening. Um, where do you get your inspiration from then? Do you get a lot of requests from the listeners, or is it everyday
We
life that gives you your ideas?
we do know we get quite a bit of feedback. We like to get voice feedback. So there's a button on the web page that you can go over to and leave 90 seconds of voice feedback, and we
Ah,
as long as we can understand what you're saying, and I don't just mean from a language perspective, I mean that the audio is understandable, then we
mm,
put it in the podcast as a short listening piece, and then we'll comment on what you've said. So, very often people will ask a question or they'll make a comment about a previous episode, or they'll suggest a topic, and then we'll speak about that topic. So we do get a lot of feedback from the audience. And then when we're stuck, yeah, we just think of things to talk about. And it can be anything from we've done one recently on cakes and pastries, just because
ooh.
I've got a very sweet tooth. We've we tend to have quite a large Spanish audience following us. So we focused on different Spanish speaking countries in the past. So we've done a podcast on Argentina, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, Latin American countries, Mexico. So that's one thing. Yeah, but just very varied, very different topics, and we try and cover as wide audience as we can.
That's cool. And I think it's nice that you get the listener feedback as well, because I mean, I've had written feedback, and I'm always happy to get feedback, but it didn't occur to me to have this option for people to leave feedback. I think that's cool. I think it's nice that people do that as well who are learning, because sometimes it takes a bit of courage, to click that record button and say something in another language. But I think it says something about you if your listeners feel relaxed and confident enough to do that.
Well, hopefully they do, and obviously, with the more feedback we get, the more we think, oh, great, more people are listening. So yeah, and it also gives the students a chance to record and send something, hear their voice on the podcast. But when you're recording like that, first of all, obviously you need courage to be able to do it.
Yeah.
But then you might record it and think, oh, I don't like that very much. I'm going to try again. So then you record it again and you record it again. Well, of course, that's great practice. There's nothing better for your speaking than re-recording and improving your pronunciation each time, or maybe thinking of a better expression. So that re-recording process is also very useful.
So you're allowed to do that, or does it check before it sends, or do you have to send multiple?
No, we use a service called SpeakPipe, which is free. You just embed it in the WordPress website and you click on it and you record. It cuts off after 90 seconds. So if you don't finish your message, you could always send another one as well. But then if you're not happy, then you don't send it. You
have the
delete
option.
it. Yeah, you delete it and then cool. Record again.
Yeah, well, that's a cool idea. It kind of brings listeners' voices to life. I like that idea.
Exactly.
So where can people find out more about you? I will include all the links, but where's the best place to find out what you're up to and to connect with you online?
Well, my website is at englishcraig.com. That's Craig, CRAIG.com. And I need to link my podcast website to my main website. So I'll be doing that hopefully next week. But the podcast website is inglespodcast.com. That's INGLES podcast, PODCAST.com. That's where the podcast lives. Or wherever you get your podcast, wherever you get Kirsty's podcast.
Exactly. So the website is where people can find out about your one-to-one lessons, your group lessons. If they have, if they're preparing for the Cambridge exam, I guess they can organize something with you there. Do you still do tuition for that, or?
Yes, I do. Yeah. As I mentioned before, if you're preparing for speaking tests, I'm more than happy to jump on Zoom with you and give you a practice test, and then give you feedback on how I think you would do in the exam and how you can maybe get a better mark. So yeah, feel free to reach out, englishcraig.com.
Okay. And are you around on any of the social media channels, or do you prefer to send people to your site?
Yeah, there are links to those on the website. I haven't really been active on Instagram or TikTok. I've got, as I said before, videos on YouTube, and I'm trying to get more active on LinkedIn. I know you're quite keen on LinkedIn as a platform. So I do like LinkedIn, but there just seems to be so many places these days, Kirsty.
Yeah, you have to choose.
You have to choose
and focus on that thing.
Yeah, so I'll try to post more on LinkedIn in the future.
Okay, well, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. It's been really good speaking with you and getting your tips. And
my pleasure.
Yeah, wishing you all the best. And yeah, let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Kirsty. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.